Here's a short overview of how we can control Azure costs with time extended tools. If we have resources in Azure, we can connect to that data and land that into data enrichment. Data enrichment is a staging and landing area for your data, which allows you to enrich and bring more data into it. So we fetch both billing data and all resource details that we need from Azure via their APIs. We both manually and automatically add responsibility and allowances to teams and departments and all the extra information we need to make decisions here. And when we have done that prepping of the data, we can connect with our time extended data quality, create all the data sets we require. For example, we can have one data set which is just billing history, another one which is virtual machines, etc. And then we can create multiple rules on top of those data sets. Those rules define a business criteria of what is allowed and what's not allowed with that data. We then are continuously running that data set, and as soon as we find exceptions to those rules, we send notifications to the responsible employees for that specific resource. So that could be the resource group owner, it could be the subscription owner, it could be the one who created the specific Azure resource, however you define that in the rule itself. So for control ideas, one could be to ensure ownership of resources. Are all resources assigned to a current employee of the organization? Is that employee allowed to own this type of resource? And of course, do we need the resource itself? And just as well, we can control configuration. Are resources configured correctly? For example, if you have a virtual machine, is the size correct? Is it set to auto shut down if it's a dev machine, etc.? And we can, since we have billing data over time, we can also see is a specific resource costing us more than usually. So we can kind of spot those early on. As for configuration, the first step is to connect to Azure. So we create a API key and we fetch the data into our area. Step 2 is to enrich, and both automatically and manually. For example, we can extract data from the tags. We can figure out all the subscriptions, and we get everything that we can do automatically and push that into the correct staging table on our end. But you can also create manual fields to give us more information. For example, who is ultimately owner of specific resource and should receive all notifications for those. Step 3 is to configure the controls, and step 4 is to orchestrate everything together, since we have controls that rely on data being there. And to get into more detail here, to stage the data, we land the data in time extended data enrichment. For example, here I'm looking at a list of all the Azure resources that we have created in our environment. So we have about 11,500 resources, and we extract all the information we need. For example, here I'm reading information from the tags in the resource. Then we enrich the data. For example, here I've extracted all the subscription. I've extracted the costs for those subscriptions, and who is the most common owner and all that data. And then I can manually set who is the real owner of that resource. So who is ultimately notified when something is going on in that specific subscription. Same goes here, that I've imported an employee list for the company. So I can understand, for example, if an employee that has left the company is still assigned to a resource that is costing us money. As part of the automatic enrichment, I can also, for example, notify tag when something has been created, when it was first found, and if it has been deleted, when it was actually deleted. So I actually just keep the whole history of all resources that have been created. When we have staged the data and enriched the data, we can go into step 3, which is to create the data quality controls. So here we create all the data sets we need. And the data set is a set of data that contains some list we want to control. So for example, here I'm creating a simple one, which is just all Azure resources that are currently open in our subscription. The only added part here is that I'm creating a link to the Azure portal itself for just usability. We can also create a bit more complex data sets, like here I'm creating Azure Virtual Machine dataset, which, for example, includes who's the ultimate owner of that specific resource, what is allowed for virtual machine size, and a link to the portal itself. When I've created those data sets, I can also create rules on top of those data sets. So this is the whole list of all of the virtual machines, but I want to create rules on top of that that defines all the VMs that are breaking that specific business rule. For example, here I'm connecting to the Azure resources, and I'm finding everywhere we have this invoice section name, which are costing us more than 500 euros a month. And we can see the results here. So we have few resources that are costing us more than we can allow in that specific invoice section. Same goes for the virtual machines. Here I can find every virtual machine that's costing us more than 100 euros a month in that specific subscription, where they are not set to auto shutdown, and the VM config is not okay here below the fold here. This is a dev section here, which means that we should always auto shut down in that specific instance. When I have all this set together, I can put that into a process and make sure that the controls run when we have fetched new data. So I can see here that everything is green, meaning that we are reading the data correctly, but these controls are red, meaning they are breaking the data quality rules that we set here. So we have 28 resources missing these tags here that we require. And for end users, for example, for myself here, whenever I create a resources that is breaking a rule that we have created, then I will receive an email like this that I have 2 resources here, the costing more than 500 Danish over the last 30 days. So for myself as a user here, whenever I get this email, I can click the link here to go directly into Azure and fix the configuration there. So for me as an end user, this is really easy to fix those specific issues.